Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive geopolitical shock that is sending ripples across the entire globe. We're talking about the recent U.S. blockade that has effectively slammed the doors shut on India's access to its second-largest oil supplier, Iran. Now, this isn't just some dry story about barrels of crude. It's a real-world collision between global superpowers and the everyday crushing cost of living.
So let's just dive right into the core dilemma here. The United States is essentially backing India into an incredibly tight corner where they are forced to pick a side. On one hand, you have a nation desperately needing affordable energy to fuel its massive growth, and on the other, a critical strategic alliance with Washington. It's a high-stakes balancing act, and there is literally zero room for error.
Now, you might be thinking this is just some high-level, abstract foreign policy debate happening behind closed doors. Absolutely not. This decision directly hits the wallets, the daily commutes, and the dinner tables of 1.4 billion Indian citizens. Everything from the cost of filling up a two-wheeler to the price of daily vegetables transported across the country completely hinges on this single geopolitical pivot.
Here is how we're going to break this down today. 1. The Iranian oil shock. 2. The household inflation crisis. 3. Three impossible options. 4. The strategic tightrope. And 5. The hidden costs of sanctions.
All right, let's start with part 1, the Iranian oil shock.
Look, for years, Indian refineries, like Reliance Industries' massive Jamnagar complex, were absolutely thriving by processing millions of barrels of Iranian crude. Why? Because international sanctions basically turned Iran into a desperate seller, meaning they offered deep discounts. It was a massive financial win for India. But without it, well, India faces a harsh new reality, coughing up expensive, standard market prices for replacement crude.
And that brings us directly to part 2, the household inflation crisis.
Without that cheap Iranian oil, India's forced to look elsewhere, right? Places like Brazil, West Africa, or Russia. But here's the kicker. That replacement crude comes with a staggering premium of $20 to $30 a barrel. Think about that for a second. When the raw material required to literally keep your country moving suddenly costs $30 more per unit, the economic shockwaves are immediate. For a vibrant democracy of 1.4 billion people, passing that $30 premium down the supply chain is like lighting a match in a powder keg. We're talking about politically explosive household inflation. Suddenly, scooter and rickshaw fares jump. Freight charges for trucks moving goods across states surge. And boom, you see an immediate spike in the price of everyday staples at the local market, like cooking oil, dal, and onions. When fuel goes up, the basic cost of surviving goes up. And for the government, inflation of this magnitude is a very real threat to domestic stability.
So, what's a government to do? That leads us to part 3, India's 3 impossible options. The folks in New Delhi are essentially staring down a 3-step menu of terrible choices. They can try to use back channels, they can eat that crushing household inflation we just talked about, or they can beg Washington for an exemption. Let's unpack each of these.
Option 1 is basically going rogue. Continue buying Iranian oil through shadow channels. And make no mistake, India totally has the infrastructure to pull this off. They know the shipping routes, the payment mechanisms, the intermediary banks. The problem? Executing this play risks triggering devastating U.S. secondary sanctions, and that is the nuclear option. It could sever India's access to the U.S. financial system, cut them off from critical American tech, and freeze them out of the dollar entirely.
Option 2, buy at market price. But as we know, that unleashes a crushing inflation crisis on everyday citizens, punishing them right in their wallets. Nobody wants that. So option 3 is to ask the U.S. for a waiver, kind of like what they got during the Trump administration. But geopolitics have completely shifted. In today's highly charged wartime atmosphere, granting India an exemption would undermine the entire U.S. pressure campaign. It's practically impossible for Washington to say yes to that right now.
Adding fuel to the fire, we hit part 4, the strategic tightrope.
This right here brilliantly illustrates the tug-of-war New Delhi is caught in. As a vital U.S. partner, India is a member of the Quad, a cornerstone of the Indo-Pacific strategy, and a crucial counterweight against China. But at the exact same time, they are deeply reliant on Iranian infrastructure. They heavily depend on the Chabahar port project just to access Central Asia and Afghanistan, bypassing Pakistan entirely. You simply can't untangle India from either side without causing severe, lasting strategic damage.
So, trying to thread this impossible needle, India is currently exploring alternative payment mechanisms to buy Iranian oil without touching the dollar. They're specifically looking at frameworks similar to the rupee-ruble mechanism they used to buy Russian oil during the Ukraine sanctions. But honestly, there's a massive catch. This comes with immense political risk, and practically speaking, it's severely limited in scale. It's a temporary band-aid, not a long-term cure.
Let's zoom out to the macro level for Part 5, the hidden cost of sanctions.
By forcing the world's fifth-largest economy to make this agonizing choice between its own citizens avoiding crippling inflation and keeping its alliance with Washington intact, the U.S. is inadvertently accelerating a profound shift. When countries see the U.S. dollar being weaponized to dictate their domestic policies, it rapidly speeds up the global hunt for alternatives to the dollar.
There's a fantastic quote from our sources. Memories in geopolitics last longer than wars, and it is so incredibly true. Every single nation watching this unfold, every country ever forced to choose between securing cheap energy to keep their citizens afloat and securing American diplomatic approval, remembers that coercion long after the immediate conflict is over. It creates a very real, lasting scar on international trust.
Which leaves us with this final, pivotal question. Will the desperate, everyday need for affordable energy and the fight to stop spiraling household inflation be the ultimate catalyst that finally breaks the absolute power of the US dollar on the world stage? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, smash that subscribe button to support The Explainer, and join us for our next deep dive where we'll explore the Lebanon trigger that could blow up the regional ceasefire. Catch you then.